Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy McNamara. I'm here with Aoife Fitzmaurice from Fidelity Investments, and today we're going to talk to you about work we're doing to enable a pipeline as code capability for all our developers in Fidelity. We'll talk you through the plans we have for the area. We'll talk to you through a description of our area and the principles that help us underpin enabling this capability for such a large amount of developers. So standard disclaimer here, just to make sure everyone knows this presentation is a case study of Fidelity Investments experience. It's not an endorsement or recommendation of any vendor, product, or service. So a quick introduction for myself. My name is Jimmy McNamara. I have over 20 years experience in the IT industry, development experience, development background, and in the last 15 years, a large focus on vendor products and DevOps tooling.
And I'm Aoife Fitzmaurice. I'm a spring chick here, so I'm not going to say how many years I have experience within the industry itself, but I've been with Fidelity about 10, 11 years at this stage and been with architecture now the last 3 or 4 years.
Thanks, Aoife. Okay, so start with a little bit about Fidelity itself. So Fidelity has been a company been around, since 1946. I think one of the key things that's a real principle and a belief in Fidelity is IT is a huge enabler of business differentiation, and that's been something that's been visible since the really early stages of the company. And there's a big focus on IT, and that focus is really from the leadership down, and it's part of the culture of the firm. And in more recent times, the focus has been hugely cloud focused, and the firm is very, very focused on embracing multi-cloud as a strategy, again, from leadership down, and really driving our applications out onto the public cloud. Again, Fidelity is a huge believer in IT as a business differentiator, and a huge focus on cloud also. To set some context for ourselves, we work in the ALM area. It's application lifecycle management, basically the tooling associated with developing and deploying code out to your environment. We are an enterprise focused service. We cover a large amount of capabilities, right from the point of inputting code into your source code management, scanning that code and delivering it out via pipeline and deploying it out into your target environment. We manage all those platforms and the user experience across those platforms. For us, it's all about focusing on the capabilities, focusing on the user experience, enabling self-service. We're all about enabling the developer to go fast. And big thing as well for us, we manage at scale. We manage a huge amount of developers, 12,000 plus developers. We manage a large amount of platforms, and it's all about building these platforms to be really resilient, to be really robust, and to be able to support the large amount of developers that we work with. Some of the more interesting things about our company, it is a large amount of different business units working together, and each business unit has its own needs and wants, and we need to be able to support all those different business units in what they want. And it's very much about us understanding our domain in terms of capabilities and really driving those capabilities to enable business value across all our platforms. And again, I said, the large amount of platforms that we support, we support over 1 billion downloads of Artifactory in the last month. So again, huge amount of artifacts in our systems we manage. There's over 100 million lines of code that go through our static code analysis system. So again, really large scale, really complex, and it's all about enabling and making sure that the platforms themselves are resilient, and it's also making sure that we wrap those platforms in self-service so that we're really getting out of the way of the developers and we're enabling them to go as fast as possible.
So I'm just going to run through some of the kind of principles that sorry, you're going back and forth. So yeah, apologies. So I'm going to run through some of the principles for enabling a pipeline platform just across the firm. So as kind of Jimmy kind of pointed out, we are a small central group that provide IT to the firm itself. So some of the things that we kind of walk through here will show how we kind of enable that without having to grow a huge team that for that central management. So if we go to the next one. So in terms of then the teams that we are supporting, we can see from this kind of layout, we're showing basically a maturity of the teams that needs to happen. Over time, we've gone through some of this and we've gone to be quite mature for some of the teams that we do support, but there are some teams that are still quite new in the journey in terms of looking at initially agile development, then on to continuous integration, delivery, and then deployment, and then into true DevOps teams. So the model that we kind of implement across the stack of tools and services that we do provide, we need to be able to accommodate the different levels of maturity that do exist. We also, over time have seen some of the kind of anti-patterns that may have started to emerge, but as we kind of guide those teams with some of the practices and principles that we have in place, we see a lot of these anti-patterns starting to go away, which is great. But it does, we do need that flexibility to be able, so it can't be a one size fits all. We need that flexibility to be able to allow the teams to work in a way that works best for them without enforcing a structure that may be too brittle and too restrictive for them to be able to adapt and change over time. Next slide. So from this, we're basically just giving you some of the principles that that back a lot of what we kind of implement within our business unit itself. Our strategy essentially is that, vision, strategies, directions may change depending on the time, depending on the ecosystem, depending on just the environment in general, and, the structures and organizations themselves. But if we've backed our capabilities against these principles, we should be able to ride the waves of change. So things like full automation, decoupled architectures, and everything is code approach to how we build our solutions and an API first strategy means that regardless of the underpinnings and the platforms and structures, if we have kind of applied these guardrails and these principles, we're able to kind of make back-end changes without impacting our users and the way they approach their pipelines. Next slide. Another key thing for us is to be able to kind of do measurement, not necessarily to kind of basically shame teams in any way, shape, or form, but to be able to kind of allow them to self-educate, to kind of use these standard metrics that are not Fidelity based, but are industry standard metrics, so that they can understand at what level they are in terms of maturity and how they can then make that progression, like we saw in the previous slide, how can they can go from continuous integration to continuous deployment to continuous delivery and to a full DevOps with full automated pipelines end to end. So giving some of these capabilities that are less around, green and red, are things up or down, it's more into the business value and the maturity of those teams and allowing them then to make progression themselves to then be able to realize the full value of pipelines. Another key principle then for us, because we are a small team, like Jimmy had kind of talked about at the beginning, it's not possible for us to be able to have a white glove service for all of our business unit partners. It's just not possible. We would have to expand and grow to have a huge number within the team to support that. So having self-service functionality and capabilities that we produce that essentially enabled both an API and a UI format allows us to then grow at pace. BUs can adopt our platform very easily. They can create their Bitbucket, their pipelines, their Artifactory target spaces, and start to deploy out to the cloud providers in a click of a button. So we've kind of talked a little bit around some of these structures that we have at the moment. On the left, it's the Bootstrap onboarding and all of the self-service capabilities that we do provide. We have a layer then that we look at kind of platform management and governance. So things like, supporting the core versions that are available, doing the upgrades, doing the audit, technology lifecycle management, cost management, secrets management, all the core aspects that are required in order to make sure that the developers don't have to worry about the tools and capabilities themselves. They can just leverage them to go forward. We take on a lot of that ownership itself. But then as we kind of look to the future, we're conscious of the rate of pace change within technology. Previously, it might have been 5, 6, 7 years, and then, you look at the next thing. Now it's every couple of years. So we constantly have to be evaluating the next thing. So we need to be able to try, scan, scale. Is this something that we're interested in? Are our business partners interested in it? And how do we scale it out then if that is something that we should go forward with? So constant evolutions within that space. And then, as I talked about before, as we look to kind of help our teams kind of mature into a DevOps practices, doing the everything as code models with pipelines, etc., we need to be able to kind of develop those communities so that we enforce those kind of engineering practices within those communities themselves. So a lot of these kind of boxes up the top talk about some of the areas that we really focus in when we look at our developer communities. And then on the right-hand side, these are a lot of the kind of metrics that we previously talked about. How can teams understand how they are doing in terms of their journey? How can the business partners, the management layers, make sure that we actually focus and we actually prioritize our automation, our everything as code approach? We do this through metrics. How do we measure the value of what we're doing? So that's the right-hand side that we make capable for our teams. And obviously the bottom layer then talks about the providers that we would be deploying out to as a firm. Next slide. So this is a single example just of how we kind of implement some of the patterns that do exist. Again, just to be clear, we're not enforcing a model on anybody in any way, shape, or form. What we do is provide the platforms for the actual teams themselves. The teams define that Docker factory, so the steps within those stages. They can pick and choose which steps they actually want to do, but they have a set patterns in terms of those pipelines that they offer to us that we then make available within the platforms themselves. We also have looked at inner sourcing our libraries and utilities. So instead of every team having to create those capabilities themselves, they just come to that inner source libraries and we work together. There's no ownership kind of concerns around this space. This is for everybody, and everybody is capable of rewriting into it. Then we do a structure in order to then do the code reviews, the peer reviews, and make that available. As I talked about the standard pipelines that the BUs look at themselves and kind of offer that back into us so that we can hook it into our configurations and our platforms. So out of the box, they can see what pipelines they should be using as they kind of do their journey to the cloud. Then if we think about some of the central areas, so things like cloud governance policies, corporate secure SDLC and ITIL policies, some of the centralized base images, etc. Our users don't really have to worry about any of these things because they're using standard pipelines and libraries that are leveraging the essential capabilities that do exist. And all they have to do is plug in their actual applications themselves, the various different things that make them unique to their application or their business unit, and then deploy it out to their desired target endpoint. You're on mute, Jimmy.
Thank you, Aoife. Aoife talked about the principles that underpin our the services we offer. But as with anything else, it's not all about process. It's not all about technology. So there's many things and many aspects to enabling, a best-in-class organization and best-in-class experience for our developers. Key for us is making sure that we're a financial services company. Security is absolutely paramount to us. It's all about making sure that we enable automation through our DevOps pipeline, but also provide the correct controls across that platform, so that we're being very, very security minded in terms of how we enable these platforms. And underpinning that as well is a philosophy and a culture of automate at all times, and that's something that is driven down into the teams. And driven up from the teams also, in terms of just a complete focus on automation and taking the time to develop the automation on the basis that initial investment makes absolute sense. Especially as you enable. Especially as you're enabling an organization as a scale, making sure that you automate really does provide the gains, and it allows you to scale out to the type of levels we need to scale to. Other things, that are key is about it's about that kind of focus on technology and team culture, and also constantly communicating. Within ourselves, we have a big focus on making sure that we're continuously learning as a team. We're also focused on making sure that, we've really, really good communication with our team, and also enabling the team with really, really curious and inquisitive people that are going to push the boundaries in terms of, making sure that that we continue to focus on automation, we continue to focus on, best-in-class technologies, and enabling the best experience possible for our developers, and making sure really it is that the easy way is the right way. An additional part of what's key for us is about having really open and honest conversations with our partners. We're a central business unit. We face off to, we're a central service. We face off to multiple business units. Each of the business units has different needs and wants. And it's just having the very honest conversation in really trying to understand what is the business need that is driving your ask. I think we're all technologists. And there is maybe there's sometimes it's very, very easy to dive into technology, and actually you need to stand back, think about the capability, think about the business need, think about the outcome, and have a discussion around the outcome, so that as a central organization we can design a robust and scalable capability that supports all needs and wants. And really, when you have those conversations, you're changing your dialogue from a question around, your systems being scalable, to more question about, well, okay, how are we going to help you solve your business problems so that we can help you run faster, we can help your developers develop features faster. And again, ultimately what that helps Fidelity as an organization release new features faster, and helps IT become that business differentiator that we spoke about at the beginning. So that's a summary. So thank you very much, and we're open for questions now.
David, so that's an interesting question. So we have to, like I kind of spoke about at the beginning, right, that we have to accommodate many different types of teams, and equally those teams have a particular journey that they're on. Some teams are very kind of manual, that they're still quite hands-on. They have to go through a lot of red tape in order to be able to do their CI/CD functions. And then other teams are incredibly streamlined. Everything is automated. There's an end-to-end kind of controls that are in place. They have change functions that are completely automated and go well out. So within our space, owning the need to be able to the entire spectrum as part of that and not get in the way. So from very immature teams, as they start their journey, we can enable them with those practices so that over time, working with the other communities that we've developed, they do start to mature and they do start to kind of hit further right in that spectrum.
Yeah, I do think the question itself is our focus is based on business needs. So going organization, so we do need to support all, we need to support the modern serverless, and we need to support other types of development, whether it's not containerized, and really kind of support the business depending on where they are in terms of how and why they develop it the way they do.
There's another one here then about decoupled architectures. So when we talk about some of this, so there are some capabilities, right, that are baked in, that are homegrown. Some things like governance, change management, some of these types of functions. So we generally look to decouple those from the actual platforms itself. So instead of like focusing on libraries, things like that would be very specific to a particular platform, can't be leveraged across platforms, for example, we would look to do more of an API first strategy for those types of things. So our pipeline orchestration might reach out to a set of API services that then would look to help along that chain. So that's generally what we mean by decoupled architectures. Jimmy, there's a question there about entry costs for CI/CD. Do you want to grab that one?
Yeah, so not sure what that really kind of focuses on. So, what the ocean, or what would your entry cost for every CI/CD system? I think some of that is about kind of demonstrating the values of your system, and kind of creating good partnerships with your development communities across the various business units. I think some of what we do is we establish good platforms across robust, scalable platforms across CI, for instance, CD. And what we do then is we, as a central business unit, communicate across various groups within the business units, and we help facilitate sharing of knowledge, if you like. So I suppose we're trying to reduce that entry cost as much as possible by leveraging the developers within the organization to share best practice and provide as much bootstrap as possible, so that the cost of actually using the system is diminished over time. And actually, our goal really is to wrap these capabilities in the self-service portal and orchestrate the capabilities across the various platforms, so that ultimately get to a point where new developers come into the organization and they can get pretty much set up within the day of joining, so that they can be productive and start to look at focusing on releasing code and releasing business value, which actually is why they were hired in the first place.
And I think the other thing to kind of add from that perspective is that we're very keen on enabling inner source projects, and ensuring that we kind of work with the communities. Like, Jimmy talked a lot about the culture that is in Fidelity. Our job is not to get in the way of people, but it's equally not our job to kind of duplicate the CI/CD, libraries, APIs, whatever we're kind of leveraging as part of our orchestration. So communities together, creating an inner source environment so that they can be leveraged and go forward. But equally, we're not in the way of actually developing that and maturing that space either.
Yeah, and there's another question there from David in terms of, size of teams. Are we consulting practice or platform? So we're primarily platform, but we also provide a mechanism for linking teams across the organization. So again, it's more about inner sourcing and developing that community around identifying common practices and also and sharing that, so that the leveraging platforms is reduced. And then there's that's your common, and we're trying to harvest as much of that to the center as possible. And then there's going to be specific needs with each of the business units that are different, which is okay as well, right? As an IT service, you're about enabling the business, and that must be respected at all times.
So I think Victor kind of has a question around serverless. So the challenge with serverless is always, audit, traceability, etc. So the same guardrails that do exist for any technology type also exist for serverless. So if you have deployed a serverless function, there needs to be traceability of how you've done that deployment, what you've deployed it back to, our everything as code approach to how we kind of do our deployments, etc., would help with that traceability itself as we kind of bring back that metadata as well. Equally, as those kind of functions, etc., are kind of running within the cloud providers themselves, the output, the traceability, the logs related to that also needs to be brought back, so that in the event of a particular team getting audited, they have that full traceability across the board. And that's not necessarily solely our responsibility. It's a combined responsibility with the teams themselves, as they have responsibilities to audit, and we have responsibilities as the platform owner as well. So then in terms of the architecture diagram, so it's an example diagram, so there's many different things that we do have in place. I don't think we can necessarily talk to any specifics in the we perform, but suffice it to say, Fidelity is complex.
Yeah, I mean, Fidelity is broad. It's broad. It supports many different business units or in different industries, and that they're, depending on the industry, they're independent on how they develop and release software. So then it's just a question of supporting all that and supporting the business ultimately.
Any other questions?
And there's one question there about what are your dependencies. So we are very much cloud focused, and one of the things we benefited from moving from the external cloud was the reduction in dependencies in terms of say infrastructure teams itself. So infrastructure as code available on external cloud means that your developers can take on that responsibility. So again, as one of the benefits of driving your platforms out to the cloud is the reduction of the number of dependencies you have on groups or people outside of your own team, which is definitely great. And also the other benefits being, as you get out there, you're benefiting from additional features and functions, especially around automation, which is great as well. It provides that ability to, as long as if you focus on and value executing the automation, you can really go after that, which definitely provides huge benefits and allows you to actually go after more feature functions.
So I think Kenny here has a question around choosing your own pipelines versus standardization. So I suppose within our kind of viewpoint, it's not an either or. So I think, if you kind of look at it and you kind of require everybody to adopt a small set of actual kind of pipelines themselves, it can become quite a brittle system. There's many different kind of use cases that you would need to enable. Your central team would have to grow to be quite large in order to be able to support the entire firm. Instead, we have multiple business units that Jimmy kind of talked about before, and they, their interest is not to actually create a huge amount of snowflake pipelines. Their interest is to kind of leverage what's already been used as part of this inner source kind of program that does exist. And by process of kind of working through that and the communities that we do have, a standardization does appear. It's a natural kind of standardization versus an enforced type of a pattern. Hopefully that kind of helps a little bit. It's a complex ecosystem for sure. Problem? Any other questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think we're wrapping up shortly. So yeah, anybody has any other questions?
Okay, good stuff. Take care. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much, everybody. We're going to leave.